This woman's protest changed history, but how it's me. Welcome to my channel. Today we're answering the extraordinary question, how did one woman's protest change history? And as always, there's more to the story than meets the eye. On June 1913, a British woman named Emily Davidson stood in front of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby and deliberately threw herself in front of it. The king's horse reared up, but he did not trample her. Instead, Davison slid under its hooves and landed on the ground where she had fallen. She had been carrying a placard that read "Votes for Women," and this act of protest made headlines around the world. This is what we know about her and her protest. She was a member of the Women's Social and Political Union, which went by the name of WSPU. They were a militant feminist organization that had been founded in Manchester in 1903. Their goal was to achieve voting rights for women in Britain. In order to accomplish this, they decided to put pressure on the government by throwing them into complete disarray. They believed that doing so would cause people to ask why the government kept getting disrupted. And the answer would be obvious. Women just want to vote. Of course, this didn't always go according to plan. For instance, their protests regularly descended into violence because men didn't like having their daily lives interrupted by women who wanted to vote. It got so bad that Winston Churchill described the WPS as a menace to the public. In February 1912, the group began a series of acts of civil disobedience. Members started trespassing onto church property and then glued themselves to the communion rails. Others chained themselves to the railings outside of government buildings, while others still locked themselves inside of them. These actions often resulted in arrest, and in some cases, imprisonment. However, being arrested was seen as a badge of honor by many members. And those that went to jail were treated like celebrities when they came out. At this point, though, something had to give. So the British government passed a law called the Cat and Mouse Act. This allowed them to forcibly feed prisoners who went on hunger strike. Not only that, but it also allowed them to release these prisoners early if they were deemed to be unwell, which meant that as soon as they went on hunger strike, they would get released. Then they could force them to eat until they were healthy again, and then rearrest them. If the government felt like it, Davison was furious about this law and wanted to do something to draw attention back to their cause. She wanted to do something big. As part of the WSPU, Davison had already been arrested multiple times, and she knew what it was like to be inside a prison cell. She also knew that going to prison wasn't going to get them anywhere. That est when she decided that she needed to do something that would make the world take notice of their cause. At the time, the most popular sporting event in Britain was the Epsom Derby, which attracted huge crowds every year. This year would be no different, with approximately 250,000 people attending. As far as Davison was concerned, this was the perfect opportunity to bring attention to the WPS and their cause. The only problem was, she had no idea how to get onto the track. However, this wouldn't stop her. Davison had been planning this for months. She had studied the course and the race times, and she even worked out exactly how much food she'd need to eat in order to keep her weight down without starving herself. Once she'd gotten to Epsom Downs racecourse, she hid in the long grass until the king's horse came by. Then she ran across the track, jumped over a low wall and shimmied up some railings until she was standing right next to the path. Here she unfurled her banner reading "Votes for Women." Fortunately for her, though, a policeman quickly came over and yanked it out of her hands. He then tried to get her to come back over the wall, but she refused. When another officer came over and tried to pull her back as well, she grabbed onto his uniform and screamed, "Don't pull me! I'm making history!" Although they eventually got her back over the wall, by this time the commotion had attracted quite a crowd. So she thought that her mission was accomplished. All she had to do now was wait for someone to take a picture. And as luck would have it, an amateur photographer named John Burns was close by and captured the moment forever in a series of photographs. Soon after, Davison was arrested and taken away. She was charged with trespass, obstructing the police, and inciting a breach of the peace. She was also charged with refusing to give her name and address, which was a tactic that WSPU members used to avoid prosecution. As a result of her actions, she was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Once this happened, her fellow suffragettes began to take action. Thousands of people signed a petition asking for her sentence to be reduced. While these pleas fell on deaf ears, the publicity from the event helped the WSPU raise money, and their membership numbers grew rapidly as a result. But unfortunately for Davison, her time in prison was not so pleasant. She had gone on hunger strike when she was arrested, and this meant that she had to be force-fed. Davison, however, was determined to endure, and she refused to cooperate. As a result, the guards tied her down to a chair and strapped a tube into her mouth. This caused her mouth to bleed, and she spat blood all over the floor. After she was released from prison, Davison's health was never really the same again. Now that she was free, though, she wanted to commemorate the anniversary of her protest. On June 1914, she joined other members of the WSPU in London to march through the city in remembrance. During the march, a man walked past, pulled out a knife, and slashed her across the face. She managed to grab him and wrestle the knife away, but he got away. Later that day, Davison became ill and was admitted to the hospital. She died on October 14, 1913, from stomach cancer, which had been brought on by the force-feeding during her imprisonment. After she died, her body was embalmed and then taken on tour around Britain as part of a campaign for votes for women. Afterwards, she was buried in the churchyard of the Holy Trinity Church in Morden. Her grave can still be seen there today. Although Davison's death did not immediately lead to voting rights for women in Britain, it did contribute to the momentum for the cause. In 1918, the Representation of the People Act granted limited voting rights to women over the age of 30 who met certain property requirements. Then in 1928, the Equal Franchise Act finally gave women the right to vote on the same terms as men. So in a roundabout way, Davison's actions did indeed help to change history. But what else did we learn from this event? Well, for one thing, we learned just how far women had to go in order to achieve equality. Despite the fact that they had been fighting for their rights for decades, it seemed like they were still a long way from achieving true gender equality. Secondly, we learned about the importance of nonviolent resistance. Even though Davison and the other suffragettes faced arrest, imprisonment, and even death, they never resorted to violence. Instead, they believed in the power of the people and the right for women to participate in democracy. Lastly, we learned about the courage of ordinary people. Davison was not a celebrity or a politician. She's just an ordinary woman who was willing to stand up for what she believed in. So what do you think? Did Davison's actions change history? If so, how and in what ways? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you have UNT already, so that you do and miss out on any of our future videos. Until next time.